Hello. Hello, and welcome to my first broadcast, which is Let's Talk Jackson, which is a segment that I plan to do bi-week or twice per week, which will talk in depth about certain issues going on in Jackson County and why this election is so critical in on August 2nd, 2022. So, as an introduction, my name is Stacy Lake, and I'm running for Jackson County Executive on the Democratic side. So far, it's only going to be me and Frank White on the Democratic election. And the reason why I decided to run was because of the 2019 property tax crisis and how that made me aware of multiple issues going on in Jackson County. So I did an in-depth research project which I found more errors. And after I realized that no other Democratic candidate was actually going to run for Jackson County Executive, I decided to stand up and put my name in the ballot because right now we are in what I deem a crisis in Jackson County when it comes to the management and the maintenance of the Jackson County government, but also how they are conducting themselves when it relates to the civilians, for instance, the property taxes. And I know beforehand I stated that this was going to be focused on what is the Jackson County executive and why there needs to be a change in leadership. But doing this PowerPoint, I realized that I had a lot of information about the property tax crisis. And so I'm going to briefly cover what the Jackson County executive is and why there needs to be a change in leadership when it comes to the property tax side. On Wednesday's broadcast, we're going to specifically focus on the auditing of Jackson County and how the Jackson County budget has been maintained for these years, because I feel that it's such an important topic that it needs its own video and its own discussion. So let's get started. So first off, what is the Jackson County Executive? I like to describe the Jackson County Executive um, for people who are unaware of what the Jackson County government how they operate and what the positions and titles are, as the mayor of the unincorporated areas of Jackson County with an umbrella effect. That means that when you look at Jackson County as a whole, uh, incorporated areas are the 10 municipalities, like, for instance, Kansas City, Raytown, Grandview. The areas in between are the unincorporated areas that the Jackson County executive is responsible to take care of as if it was their mayor. But they also have an umbrella effect for other resources like the jails or like the county buildings that are in different municipalities. And so basically they're the manager and administrator of the Jackson County government. And this is important because they oversee the departments within the Jackson County government, or they're supposed to oversee the departments. The Jackson County executive, they're basically responsible for one of their primary responsibilities is for the day-to-day activities of the Jackson County government to make sure that the Jackson County government is actually operating smoothly. And they're also responsible for the submission and execution of the Jackson County budget, which currently is projected to be this year at $452.8 million. And that money is primarily derived from our property taxes and is supposed to be used to help the government's function in the county, which includes building maintenance, how our counties run, the jails, and etc. Now, why a change in leadership is necessary? These are the four main points that I've come to as in conclusion. First is the poor and unethical property tax assessments, which we'll go into depth today about. In my presentation, I'm going to show or explain how faulty the property tax assessments were, how they targeted the minority and poor communities in Jackson County, and how they are actually being very much subjectively applied. And even the county executive isn't following his own property tax assessment rules. The next point is negligent management of our Jackson County budget, which is what I'm going to discuss on Wednesday. And that's going to be an in-depth discussion about the Nicole Galloway audit and why we're not utilizing the funds, our taxpayer funds properly. And it's mostly due to the fact that there isn't much focus or much leadership going on in the Jackson County government currently. My third point is the reckless treatment of our county buildings. A lot of people know for years that our Jackson County buildings have been crumbling and that our jails, all three jails currently are in failed to poor or poor to failed condition. And that's what the JCDC says. And right now, it is a humanitarian crisis. And I'm going to have a video about that after I do the auditor's report so we can really go into what's going on in the jails and why it hasn't been fixed, which is primarily because of failure in leadership. And finally, and I think is most importantly, is how there's no future vision for Jackson County. One thing I want everyone to leave with after you hear this podcast is I want you to ask yourself the question, what has Jackson County done for you in the last 20 years? What initiative have they brought forth that actually changed or brought a positive effect to your lifestyle? Because if the Jackson County government is utilized properly, we could have big initiatives. Like, for instance, we could have a modern day public transportation system that would connect all municipalities together. This is something that we can achieve. We don't have to have our buildings, our county buildings crumbling currently. We don't have to have an unethical jail. And it is unethical, which I will get into in a later podcast. We can actually be competitive nationwide and build Jackson County to become a modernized county and be ahead in the nation. And that's why I think a change in leadership is necessary. Currently, our county executive has no future vision for Jackson County. He has no policy for Jackson County. And we have to really think about the next 4 years, what we want Jackson County to be in the next 4 years. And that's why this election is so critical. Now, when we're talking about the property tax crisis, we have to know about who the main players are. Now, the main players were the Jackson County Executive, which is Frank White, the Director of Assessment, who is Gail McCain Beatty, the consultant, who is John Q. Ebert. And Jackson County government actually paid his consultant firm over $2 million to do this property tax assessment correctly. So that's why he's so critical. Now, first, let's talk about the Jackson County's government's violation of state law. We have a state statute under Chapter 137, which basically requires a physical inspection before a property's taxes are increased by over 15%. And even though we have this law, Gail McCain Beatty still admitted that they avoided using MLS data. Well, I'm sorry. I think my video froze, so hold on a second. Oh, geez. I'm sorry, my video froze. Hold on a second. Okay, I'm back here. Sorry about that. So, Missouri state law requires a physical inspection before a property tax or before a property's taxes is increased by 15%. But during this entire property tax crisis, the director of the assessment department, Gail McCain Beatty, admitted that they, one, avoided using MLS data. MLS data is data that a lot of real estate investors and people who determine the value of a property use. It's kind of like the golden standard of determining how much a property is worth. Two, they admitted that they did not conduct physical inspections, which is major because this violates the state statute. And three, Gail McCain Beatty admitted that she used satellite photos to conduct the property valuations instead of conducting a physical inspection. That means, in accordance with this state statute, all the properties that received a property tax increase of over 15% was in violation of Missouri state law. But, like I said, nothing was done. Now, Angie Racono, who is a news reporter at KCTV5, did an amazing report about the property tax crisis, which if you're interested about this later on, I recommend going to the KCTV5 and seeing all parts of her investigation. But one of the things that she found out was, or what she discovered was John Q. Ebert's emails to Gail McCain Beatty. Now, remember, John Ebert is the consultant to the Jackson County government when it came to these property tax assessments. And he worked with Gail McCain Beatty in order to determine our property values. Now, before the notices were sent, John Ebert sent an email to her that stated, "The assessment department and the county are terribly exposed for residential values mailed out that cannot be explained." And this was because, and this is where we get to the second email, where he states, "You cannot and will not be able to publish for the 2019 reassessment notice a fully accurate and uniform set of property values. It will take at least 2 years and probably 4 years to get things right." In these emails, we see that the main consultant to the Jackson County government when it came to our property taxes stated that they did not have a fully accurate or uniform set of property valuations in order to determine the level or in order to determine our property values. So this entire property tax valuation in 2019 was fundamentally flawed. Now, in 2019, a record number of appeals were filed. Over 30,000 appeals were filed, and this is massive because that's more than 10% of all real estate properties in Jackson County. And I want everyone, if there's one thing that you should leave with knowing, is that the county consultant admitted that they did not have accurate and a uniform set of property valuations in 2019. That means that all of this should have been recalled and resubmitted for a later time when they did have the accurate values, but they did not do that. Okay, I'm going to share a video that KCTV5 did on a report, because I believe that this is so critical to understand how flawed this property tax evaluation was done. So please enjoy. Sorry, I just realized that the sound is off. Um, let me see how I can fix this. Oh, I'm so sorry, Herbert. The sound should be on for this. Yes, there should be a sound on this video. I'm going to post a comment with this link of this video in the description because I cannot figure out why the sound is not working on this video. And next time I'll have this fixed, but I'll post the link to this video in the chat. And I apologize. I apologize for that. For some reason, the sound isn't playing in the video. I'll look into that so that next time I'll have the sound playing the video. But basically, in that video, it showcases John Q. Ebert's admission that not only were the property taxes valued improperly, but that they knew this, but they never recalled it, which I personally find egregious because the Jackson County government, during the time of the property tax crisis, had multiple excuses for their poor evaluations. One of the excuses was the fact that the county didn't have enough money to function, which I'll show you in the Wednesday podcast that is a complete lie. Because due to the auditor's report, it was discovered that the Jackson County budget was actually underutilized, meaning over $100 million of taxpayer money wasn't used for years because of budget management issues. But also, they stated that they kind of perpetuated this lie that it was correct and that people just needed to pay their taxes. And in this video that I posted, John Q. Ebert specifically makes the admission that it was done incorrectly and that it needed to be recalled. And so, if you have time, I posted the link to the video on the chat, and I'll figure out the whole sound issue for the next podcast. And I apologize for that. Now, on to the property tax crisis. And this is the most important thing about this entire video is that in this property tax crisis of 2019, there was an effort to target minority and poor neighborhoods. And this is more than just an allegation, which I'll show you in this post. There's actually after you see the maps, there's no question that most of the minority and poor neighborhoods were specifically targeted with property tax increases of over 15%. Now, the Hispanic Economic Development Corporation and the Valuation Solution Studies, so there's the Hispanic Economic Development Corporation and another company called Valuation Solutions. They did a study over the Jackson County property tax crisis, and they found that 54.5% of properties in non-targeted areas that were west of Troost were capped at 14.9%, but 1.33% of properties east of Troost had a cap of 14.9%. Now, what this means, so that everyone can understand this as clear as possible, is that in over 55% of the areas, or actually 45% of the areas that were west of Troost, they had their property tax increased by over 15%, right? but 45% had their property tax increased by over 15%. But 55% of properties west of Troost had that cap at 14.9%. Now, when we go to east of Troost, only 1.3% of the properties east of Troost had that cap of 14.9%. The other properties had tax increases of over 15%. That means that there was potentially 97% of the properties east of Troost had tax increases that were over 15%. People who've seen me live, they know my story about how my house was increased in the property tax crisis by our taxes were increased by over 300%. Hyde Park, my neighborhood, was hit hard in this property tax assessment in 2019. But this shows that the areas east of Troost, the majority of the neighborhoods there that have the houses, they also experience those 100, 200, 300, 500, 1,000% property tax increases. Now, this is the visual comparator that was provided in a lawsuit against Jackson County government for to show race discrimination and also wealth equity discrimination in Jackson County. Now, this is a visual comparator. The yellow area in the map are properties that were increased, the property taxes that were increased by over 15%. The areas in the red are properties that were capped at 14.9%. So when we look at the racial dot map on the right, the green areas here indicate that these neighborhoods primarily have people of Black descent. The yellow show the Hispanic descent, and then the blue dots show people of white descent, right? So looking at this, you can see that there is a correlation here between the properties that had above a 15% tax increase and properties that were capped at 14.9%. In case if you need something that's even more jarring, I did an overlay of the tax increase map, which if you want a copy of this race map overlay, just send me a message and I can provide to you a copy, because this is something that we did on our own. But here is actually the pattern. So if we look to the left, is an outline of the properties that were actually increased by over 15% in the property tax crisis. So these were the properties that were being hit for 100, 200, 300, 500%. If we put the race map on top of that map, this is the figure that we show. So you see the outline here? This is the outline on top of the racial dot map that I showed in the prior photo. Folks, this clearly is a correlation here, that the areas that were targeted and hit the most with the 100, 200, 300, 500% property tax increases primarily happened in the minority and also poor areas of Jackson County, which should be disturbing to anyone, especially when we have the first African-American Jackson County executive, who is Frank White currently, leading this assessment. This is clear evidence to show that these areas were targeted, and things need to change, because in 2023, there's going to be another reassessment, and we've already seen the effects of the 2019 property tax assessment, which showed not only did people have increased property taxes, but a lot of people lost their homes due to this. Rental values of people who are renting homes increased. And this time, we're living in a time right now of inflation. People are not making as much money as they had before. If we're hit with the same property tax crisis that we had in 2019, there's going to be more people losing their homes, more homelessness, more individuals in Jackson County who are unable to afford a house due to the property tax increases. And this needs to change because there is a need to protect our single family households in Jackson County. And we need a person that will actually protect those houses in Jackson County. And I will do that as Jackson County executive. But this is why this election is so critical. Now, in this slide, I entitled it Failure in Leadership. And I went over the main points where I thought in the property tax crisis why there was a failure in leadership. First point is that the Jackson County executive, Frank White, had the ability to overturn the 2019 property taxes. It would be one thing to say that maybe it was arguable as to whether or not the assessment was valid or not. If it was arguable to state whether or not there was a statute that was violated. But in this case, there wasn't, because the Jackson County assessor admitted she did not conduct the physical inspections, but also that they did not conduct the property tax evaluation properly. So there's no excuse for this. And hold on a minute because my video froze. Give me a second. Sorry about that. Now, the reason why this is a failure in leadership is because in Article 3, Section 6 in the county's charter, it specifically details the responsibilities of the Jackson County executive. In paragraph 9, it specifically states that one of the Jackson County executive's duties is to correct errors in assessment and tax records, correct? What did Frank White do after he was presented with this information? Frank White didn't do anything. I remember he did try to do a tax cut of $20. So he would give every citizen in Jackson County a $20 tax cut, even though he was raising their taxes by thousands of dollars. But even though he knew that the assessment was fundamentally flawed, he did not recall the assessment. He did not correct the errors in the assessment or in the tax records. And thus, that clearly shows the failure in leadership as to the charter. But when we look at prior county executives, there was actually a precedent for this. Our former Jackson County executive, Mike Sanders, he actually recalled the property taxes in 2013 when a similar but a smaller scale property tax crisis happened. And I'm not trying to say that Mike Sanders was, a great county executive, because if you didn't know, Mike Sanders actually went to jail due to things that he did during his Jackson County executive tenure. But I'm saying even Mike Sanders stood up, and when he was questioned about his property tax valuations in 2013 and recognized that they were done incorrectly, he actually recalled the property taxes. He actually did his duty that is spelled out to him in the charter. But Frank White did not. He did not address the people. He did not give speeches. He didn't even come out to the public and give speeches addressing the public on why the situation happened. And if he did, let me know, because I don't remember this at all. All I remember is that he essentially gave either very short statements on the media or, had some letter issued. He never stood up and did his duty as Jackson County executive to make sure that these property taxes were actually done correctly. And that's what I think is, when it comes to the property tax crisis, is one of the biggest failures that he had as Jackson County executive. And that's his failure in leadership. Now, when we go into failure leadership, one thing that I really want to also show is certificate of value. So one of the things that was argued was that the reason why they weren't able to do these property taxes correctly was because the Jackson County government didn't require people to file a certificate of value when they sold the property. And what a certificate of value is, it's an additional sheet that you're supposed to file in the Recorder of Deeds office when you sell a property. Before 2019, when you sold or bought a property, you weren't required to disclose the actual purchase price of that transaction. So a lot of deeds in our county, it basically when they ask about the value of the property in the warranty deeds, it usually says a figure of like $1 or $10, which isn't usually the cost of what that property is. With the filing of the certificate of value, it's a requirement that you're supposed to disclose what the actual purchase price was. And Gail McCain Beatty basically stated that this was one of the reasons why a lot of the properties couldn't be evaluated properly. So what they're going to do is they're going to require everyone to fill out a certificate of value from here on out, which it is a requirement currently. But I'm going to show you here today that Frank White didn't even comply with his own policy. So here is a property that Frank White owned in 2006. It's at 10001 Beacon Avenue. He bought it in 2006. He sold this property on January 25th, 2021, right, for $150,000. You can look this all up. This is all on the Jackson County government site and also on the Recorder of Deeds site. Now, the property values of what it was taxed for is below here. So in 2018, it was taxed for $64,700. In 2019, it was increased to $74,000, right? 2020 is the same one. Remember, the assessments happen every 2 years. In 2021, so the property tax for 2021, even though he sold it for $150,000, and this was filed in the Recorder of Deeds office, they didn't change the market value to reflect that increase in price. They just increased it by $78,000, which here is clear proof of what the market value is. This also shows how subjective the assessment department is actually applying their policies. Because if they were applying these policies correctly, this tax year of 2021 would have reflected, or at least in the 2022 would have reflected, the change due to the sale, which is legitimate market value. This is another incident that shows the failure of leadership. Now, this is an article that was published by the Kansas City Star, and it shows a notable conflict of interest that Frank White was involved in, involving his home in Lee Summit. If you don't know, in 2017, his home in Lee Summit, or 2017, 2016, his home in Lee Summit was he basically didn't pay the taxes on his property, and they were actually going to sell his house in the property tax auction. And when he was notified of this, and these paragraphs are from the article, when he was notified of this, he and his wife had a meeting with Mike Sanders, Ken McLean, and an unidentified third attorney. And then after this meeting happened, his delinquent mortgage payments were paid for, right? And the reason why the Kansas City Star states that this alleged incident was a conflict of interest is because the Jackson County government currently pays over $50,000 each year to Ken McLean for use for renting out his building spaces for use for the Jackson County government. And so that's why this conflict of interest appears. And it's not only that, it's because, Mike Sanders was a prior Jackson County executive and he was going through those legal issues at the time. These are issues that we must be privy to, that we must know about, because this is the person who's responsible for overseeing fair and equitable tax valuations in our county. But when it comes to his properties, he bends the rules. But when it comes to the areas that he increased taxes by 100, 200, 500, 800%, he turns a blind eye, and he has the audacity to make the implication that those people should pay those taxes because those taxes were valuated correctly when they were not. And so many people lost their homes due to this. And before I forget, one of the reasons why this was also egregious is because the minority and poor neighborhoods that were targeted, those are the areas that have the least amount of resources to actually contest a property tax increase. And so a lot of those houses in those areas, they're basically stuck with overvaluations of their property taxes. And like I said before, that's how a lot of people lost their homes. Now, why does this matter? This matters because in 2023, we are going to have another property tax reassessment. This is a letter that Frank White Jr. executed this is an official letter that you can find on the Jackson County government's website, and it was made on November 15th, 2021. The important paragraphs in this memo is basically, one, that they were going to increase the amount of people in the assessment department to 15 full-time and 3 part-time positions. That would increase the budget to the assessment department by $976,000. But secondly, and this is when we get to the second paragraph, is that they're going to actually use a new computer program that they spent $18 million on to reassess our properties. $18 million. And they did this in 2021, right? They said that the property system will come online this year in 2022 and be used to do the 2023 tax assessment process. So that means they're using this brand new technology that they have not used before in order to assess the 2023 property taxes, which is not, in my opinion, it's not proper procedure. If you're using new programs, you give a couple of years to get used to what the new program is, and you test to make sure that the program is actually operating correctly. But also, they spent $18 million on this. And as you'll find out in my Wednesday podcast about the poor management of the Jackson County budget, this is money that could really be spent on other things that are beneficial to our residents. But right now, it's just being wasted. And our tax dollars are being used against us currently. And this needs to stop. Now, this is the statute that requires a physical property inspection in order for the Jackson County government to increase a property value over 15%. It's Missouri Statute 137.115. And if you see on paragraph 10, it states before the assessor may increase the assessed valuation of any parcel by more than 15% since the last assessment, the assessor shall conduct a physical inspection of the property. A lot of people in the 2019 property tax crisis used this statute in order to recall their property taxes because they were unable to prove that a physical inspection occurred because physical inspections did not occur in the 2019 property tax crisis. However, in the 2023s, they're going to ensure that all the parcels have these physical inspections. So when they increase these properties by over 15%, they can say that it was valid because we sent these assessors out and did the physical inspection and complied with the statute, which is going to make it even harder for the residents to fight these potential assessment increases in 2023. This is what's going on right now. This picture here is a picture of the current assessment department going to houses in Jackson County this year and conducting physical inspections. And if you're not home, they will actually leave this form that is to the left right here for you to fill out and send to the Jackson County government, which basically they're asking various questions about the condition of your property and whether or not you had any new improvements. And they use this form in order to determine whether or not they're going to increase your property taxes. Now, this is basically your rights when it comes to these property tax valuations and the way that the assessment department is handling it. The Jackson County government, they have no legal right to enter your property or to be on your property. The form that they present to you, you do not have to fill out the form. You are not legally required to fill out anything and give it back to the Jackson County government. You do not have to respond to any of their questions. And I also put this as a plug for my campaign. You can also vote for Stacey Lake for Jackson County Executive August 2nd, 2022, to prevent this from happening. But one thing I really want to say is what is happening is real. There's going to be a severe property tax reassessment in 2023, and there's all indications that they're going to increase a lot of properties by insane amounts in 2023. And they're doing everything to prevent us from recalling those property taxes. Now, when it comes to me, I have a different type of tax policy than Frank White does. I believe when it comes to taxes, you have a legal responsibility and then you have a moral responsibility. The legal responsibility is to comply by the state statute. But I also believe that there's a moral responsibility to protect the Jackson County residents when it comes to the application of your tax policy. I don't believe that people should have to pay 100%, 200%, 300% property tax increases because of the Jackson County government's failure to properly value our property taxes for decades. I believe in either property tax caps or a proper, increase in property taxes so people aren't hit with 50, 100, 200%. But if they have, property tax increases by 7, 10% in order to reach what it should be in a couple of years or in like 5 to 10 years, that's way better than giving a person a property tax bill that's going to increase their property value by double, triple, quadruple, etc. This is called responsible governance. Currently, we have a lot of people in our county that are living on a fixed income. Inflation right now is at over 9%. And there are some indications by a lot of people by people who write economic reports, that we might reach 20% in inflation this year, which is indicative that we might actually go into a recession. If we go into a recession, folks, there's going to be so many people that won't be able to handle property tax increases of 100, 200, 300%. We have to protect those people because we have to protect single family residential homeowners. We have to make sure that our residents are able to afford single family households and are able to maintain their houses, and that it's not because of the Jackson County policy that they're going to lose their houses due to the increase in property taxes. Hold on, give me a second. My screen froze again. So, anyways, this is the end of my presentation when it comes to the property tax crisis in 2019 and why we need a change in leadership. If anyone has any questions, I'm leaving the last 10 minutes open for questions that anyone has. And if you don't have any questions, that's perfectly fine too. But I also want to just thank you again for listening in, because knowledge is power. And we must spread this message about how critical this next election is. We need a Jackson County executive that will actually fight for our community, that will actually ensure that the functions of the Jackson County executive are being followed. And currently, they are not. Yes, Claire. Yes, I'll give you a copy of the race map overlay, and if anybody else wants a copy of it too, just send me a message over. It is critical that we get this message out, because the communities that are going to hurt the most are the communities that are living paycheck to paycheck per day, or paycheck to paycheck per day or per month. And we need to protect those communities because these are our Jackson County residents. It's not just the richest people at the top. Everyone deserves protection, and everyone should have the right for single family households. And as Jackson County executive, I will make it my duty to protect that right and to protect current homeowners from ever experiencing a property tax crisis again. But does anybody else have any other questions? Because this is open Q&A time. And I'll give a little overview about myself too, since I have a little bit of time. I'm an attorney. I'm a small business owner. I run my law firm, the Stacy Lake Firm LLC, where I specialize in civil litigation. Before then, I was a Chinese translator, which I'll do a video about my Chinese experience later on down the road, because we have a lot of topics to cover. But if anybody else doesn't have any questions, I think I'll call it a night. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as I stated before, on Wednesday, I will be going in depth about the mismanagement of the Jackson County budget. And I believe that this is one of the most important topics when it comes to the failures of Frank White as Jackson County executive, because it will showcase that not only was $100 million underutilized in our Jackson County budget for years, but that Frank White committed over 2,000 improper administrative transfers of over that, when you calculate them all together, it totals to over $10 million. And the record keeping of those transfers were so poor that we don't even know where the money went to. And this is important because these are our tax dollars. How far could $100 million go during the pandemic? How many organizations could have benefited from being funded from that $100 million that weren't funded because we weren't utilizing the funds properly. This is one of the many reasons why we need a change in leadership and why I am running for Jackson County Executive. I was one of the people that realized that our government is in a state of crisis and that we need a change. And I do come from a position of privilege. I am an attorney and I do run my own law firm. So I'm afforded the ability to spend the time to actually do this campaign to try to get a change in government. And I am honestly running for the community. And that's why I decided to even go into this race. But, anyways, thank you so much for listening in. And as I stated before, if you need any information that I provided in this video, please send me a message and I will be in contact with you. Otherwise, have a great Sunday evening, and I hope you have a great Juneteenth. Bye.